deception, determination, destruction, death. Join us in the House of Hammer, where the odds are stacked against the gambler and the lady. Well, hello there. It's nice to have you with us as we explore another room in our titular house, this one filled with gamblers and ladies, which makes it sound rather cramped. According to my admittedly lackadaisical calculations, we are now in room 33 of our film-filled abode. And we've finally inched into Hammer content from 1953, having been grounded firmly in 1952 for the last 6 episodes. What was Britain like in 1953? Well, I can tell you this much. Ian Fleming published the first James Bond novel, Casino Royale. It saw the end of post-war sugar rationing. And in Middleton-on-Sea, Sussex, Mr. F. MacPhail kicked off his trousers while swimming out to save a young boy who'd got into difficulty in the water. He helped the boy ashore, but alas, his trousers were lost in the conflict. Happily for all concerned, 2 days later they washed ashore to be reunited with their owner, complete with his watch and his wallet containing £10, which was still in the pocket. And for our Patreon subscribers, there'll be more on the state of Britain in 1953 and its trouserless heroes coming soon in a couple of bonus episodes. Anyway, our film for this episode, The Gambler and the Lady. What's it about? Well, gambling and a lady, among other things. Pretty literal. Speaking of which, here's Smokey.
As you'll hear in the roundtable, we make light of this particular film's somewhat weak title. Gambler and the Lady doesn't really conjure up a mental image of pure excitement and thrills and spills. But it's not like we haven't been here before, is it? The pure elation that River Patrol elicits? The ball-bustingly pure emotion of to having to hold? The curiosity and grandiose feelings that emanate from Never Look Back. When you put them together like that, it's surprising that we've never fallen asleep while reviewing some of these. Anyway, whilst the rather pedestrian moniker of Gambler and the Lady isn't quite what you could call a purely literal title, it's very close. But in the pantheon of what I am now officially declaring to be named Ronseal movies...
This is Ronseal Quick Dry and Wood Stain. You can't miss it. It comes in a tin with Ronseal Quick Dry and Wood Stain on it. It protects and it's rainproof in about 30 minutes, which means in about 30 minutes your wood's rainproof and protected. So if you've got wood to stain and you want it to dry quickly, use Ronseal Quick Dry and Wood Stain. It does exactly what it says on the tin.
i.e. film names that describe exactly what happens during the runtime, Gambler and the Lady is nowhere near some of the best. So, for your listening entertainment, I hereby present to you, for the very first and probably only time, the 5 best Ronseal movies ever. First up, 2011 saccharine snooze fest, We Bought a Zoo. Matt Damon tries to get over his dead missus by impulse buying lots of cages with animals inside. Fair play to him for not disappearing inside a bottle for the rest of his days, but I'm sure life is made a hell of a lot more easy when you have Scarlett Johansson running around next to you in khaki. Next up, we have 1989 sappy kid aim twaddle Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. The typical story of an almost genius scientist, played of course by Canada's favourite son, Rick Moranis, who manages to not only miniaturise his own kids, but those of his neighbours too. Hell of a result there, Rick. If you can't just get rid of your own, you might as well get rid of the little brats from next door too. I suddenly have a new hero. Third on the list is Kevin Smith's somewhat lewd effort from 2008 of Zack and Miri Make a Porno. A genius on Seth Rogen's part though. Oh no, we have no money. Oh no, my roommate is the achingly gorgeous Elizabeth Banks. What can we do to stay warm and hopefully make some money too? Well, what a fabulous idea. Down to the final 2 now, and what is in second place? Yes, it's the 2014 horror film It Follows. Not only do we never really find out what it is, we also never discover why it is following anyone in the first place. But there is simply no denying that there is an it of some kind, and it definitely does a truckload of following. Some say it's an allegory of STDs and American teen sex lives. I, on the other hand, choose to believe that the makers were just really lazy or had no money. It's more fun that way. And just what could be claiming the top spot? I think you've probably all guessed it by now. Yes, of course, it's the legendary 2006 Samuel L. Jackson vehicle Snakes on a Plane. Conceived during a Hollywood happy hour during a game called Who Could Come Up With the Most Awful Pitch for a Movie? Yes, really. Snakes on a Plane is about a plane that has snakes on it. That has got to be the Ron C list of Ron Seal movies, doesn't it? If you have any more that you think could threaten these golden five, please let us know. Right, that's me done for the day. I'm off to watch a triple bill of Hot Tub Time Machine, Hobo with a Shotgun, and Throw Mama from the Train. Ta-da!
In case you needed any further reiteration, gambling plays a large part in this movie. You know, it does feel as though gambling is an inherent British trait, somehow knitted into the very fibre of the country. As a very young lad, I would stay with my grandparents from time to time. My grandfather loved horse racing, and some of my earliest memories are of him attempting to sneak me into the bookmaker's shop while he put his bets on. I remember a dingy, smoke-filled room, seemingly unpenetrated by time or, well, natural light, where almost everyone, looking very similar to my granddad, studied newspapers or CFAX on big box televisions, a recent cutting-edge breakthrough at the time, and then filling out little bits of paper and handing them to a terminally bored-looking person behind the safety glass. Inevitably, the betting shop owner would spot me almost immediately and warn my granddad for the 127th time that as a minor I couldn't be in there. I'd then have to wait outside, usually in the hossing rain, until he was done. My granddad was a regular gambler, but he wasn't a prolific one. King of the 10-pence accumulator, for him it was all about the entertainment rather than anything else. I myself have not inherited the gambling gene, for which I find myself eternally grateful, as technological advances since those smoke-filled days of the 1980s mean it's possible to bet on just about anything using a device found in most people's pockets. And whilst I accept that a little flutter on your favourite sports team or whatever is relatively harmless, the ability to wager your last earthly tenner on the result of a Hungarian third division basketball match seems as attractive as hurling my wallet out of the window of a moving vehicle. In short, I'd say the gambling laws in this country are pretty lax, laughably so, but that wasn't always the case. We're in 1950s Britain for the gambler and the lady, and the gambling taking place is still obviously illegal, despite it being card games, rather than more understandably dodgy betting activities such as cockfights or bare-knuckle boxing. So let's have a quick look at the history of gambling in Britain. Like many of the daft things that human beings do, we've been gambling for almost as long as we've been doing anything. In the 16th century, though, a class divide began to occur. Whilst it was perceived as entertainment for the rich, for the poor, gambling was deemed to be a vice. It was also deemed to be something that interfered with military training. The Unlawful Games Act of 1541 made all gambling illegal. However, that didn't stop Queen Elizabeth from launching the first national lottery, using it as a source of funding for repairing harbours in the 1560s. The truth is that gambling laws were really not upheld, and they were regularly reviewed. Accepting that gambling was happening, the laws evolved so that by the mid-18th century, the taxation of gambling wins, gambling houses and certain games had been introduced. The biggest leap forward happened with the Gaming Act of 1845, a law that recognised games of skill and legalised them, made cheating a crime and regulated gambling houses and casinos. Ironically, it was the introduction of such regulation that would likely lead to the secret gambling houses such as those portrayed in our movie, where taxation and limitation could be avoided. The Gaming and Betting Acts of 1853 were drawn up to ban gambling outside of those regulated institutions, i.e. places where the poor or less fortunate were likely to place their bets. But to little avail. Despite the many reform movements around this time that condemned it as a sin, the Victorian era effectively introduced gambling as a social activity for everyone, regardless of class or status. One final law, the Street Betting Act of 1906, was voted in with one goal: to finally ban betting on the streets and in pubs, but neither bookies nor law officers were too keen on putting it to use. Off-course betting, i.e. gambling as we understand it today in the UK, including bingo, was finally legalised in 1960. So, this film then. Well, it stars Dane Clark as our gambler, Jim Forster, and Naomi Chance as the lady. Forster has managed to assemble a small business empire based on illegal gambling, all acquired, somewhat ironically, from an incredible run of luck.
This is where it all started 4 years ago. With your dollar, my luck, and the jack of spades. Remember, Max?
Yes, $1. Now look at him.
I came in here exactly 4 years ago, this day. I was so broke I had wrinkles on my stomach. And there was a smart guy here, a GI sergeant I knew back in the States. He was popping off about what a great gambler he was. So I borrowed $1 from Max, played him gin rummy. Couldn't do anything wrong. In a half an hour, I took 10 pounds off the guy. He didn't like it. Then he says to me, bet you double or nothing. Cut the deck. High card wins. And he turned up a 10 of spades. I turned up a jack. And that afternoon, there was a 2-year-old named Jack of Spades running at Folkestone. I put 20 on the nose to win. It had to win. Came in, paid 8 to 1. That's how I started my climb. And I'm still climbing. Because every year I come back here and I touch the starting post for luck.
Not content with money and a very comfortable life, Forster wishes to better himself and to mix with better company. One of the things he does in an attempt to improve his lot is take lessons in etiquette.
No, Mr. Forster. That glass is for champagne. That's it. Splendid. Haven't you forgotten something, Mr. Forster?
Oh, excuse me. Cigarette?
Never at dinner. Now for the silverware. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you mean these, don't you? Oh, excuse me. Come in.
It's a gent to see you, boss.
Sir.
Sorry.
Well, my hour is up in any case. Tomorrow at the same time, Mr. Forster?
Yeah. Quite.
Forster finally finds himself in the company of aristocracy through a meeting with one of his card-playing patrons, who just happens to be Lord Peter Willens, as played by Anthony Forwood. And to tell you a bit more about Anthony Forwood, here's Kev Moore.
Our Hammer hero this time is a very interesting one indeed. Anthony Forwood first stepped onto the silver screen with Hammer Films in 1949 as the window-opening weirdo in Meet Simon Cherry. This would be his first of 6 appearances with Hammer over the next few years, the others being The Man in Black, The Black Widow, The Gambler and the Lady, our next feature, Man Trap, before his final work in 1954's 5 Days. He was born into a prosperous middle-class lifestyle in 1915 as Ernest Lytton Langton Forwood. So it's not hard to see why he opted for the much simpler Tony when performing on stage, which he would do for the best parts of the 1930s. As with most of the young men at this time, his theatrical career would take a backseat as he became a lieutenant with Monty's 8th Army during the World War II Desert Campaign. It was early into the war that he met Dirk Bogarde after seeing him performing, and thanks to his stage management experience, he offered to represent him, despite moving out to the desert to get shot at. He met Bogarde again after the war and repeated the offer, and when Forwood's marriage to Glynis Johns came to an end in 1948, he would move in with Dirk Bogarde and became far more than his manager. They would be together from then on. After playing a particularly bad sort opposite Boris Karloff's Colonel March of Scotland Yard in 1956, it was time to move on. With Bendrose, the production company he'd formed with his partner, and the managing of Dirk's meteoric rise to fame, it was starting to take up more of his time than his modest, if typecast acting career could stand. They eventually moved to France together in 1968 and bought a 15th century farmhouse in Provence in the early 70s. Bogarde and Forwood lived in this house until 1983, when their return to London was needed so that Forwood could be treated for his liver cancer and Parkinson's disease. Bogard nursed him in the last few months of his life, and then on the 18th of May 1988, Forward died, aged 72. After their horrific experiences in the war, and being witness to Forward's suffering, Bogard was determined to encourage voluntary euthanasia for terminally ill patients. Bogard was left rudderless, and he became more reclusive, eventually retiring from films in 1990. The Independent on May the 9th, 1999, wrote in their obituary of Bogard, "Two brilliant lives, on film and in print," and went on to say, although he documented with frankness his early sexual encounters with girls and later his adoring love for Kay Kendall and Judy Garland, he never wrote about his longest and closest relationship with his friend and manager for more than 50 years, Tony Forward. It would then be a further 2 years until it would be stressed that he and Forward were committed lifelong partners in the British documentary arena. Dirk and Tony remained fiercely protective of the secret that only the closest to them knew, far beyond the bitter end.
Back again we go to our movie. Forster has grown tired of his possessive girlfriend Pat, and when an opportunity to court Lord Peter Willen's sister, Lady Susan Willens, presents itself, he takes it. However, trouble is brewing for Forster. The notorious Colonna brothers have arrived in London intent on taking over all illegal gambling action. When a business opportunity presents itself via his new upper-class chums, one that seems like his chance to go legitimate, will Forster risk everything for it? And will this desire to climb the social ladder leave him open to retribution from those he's now abandoned, including his jealous ex-girlfriend?
You're not wanted on the telephone. I sent for you.
Oh, you're the girl who dances.
Yes, that's right. I just wanted to tell you that I think it's about time you laid off Jim Foster.
This is a little unexpected. Perhaps you can tell me what it's all about.
Yes, I'll tell you what it's all about. Jim Foster was very fond of me before you showed up, and he's still fond of me now. You think it's very smart to be seen around with him. You get some sort of excitement out of it. Well, he means more to me than a cheap thrill. You're going to listen to me whether you like it or not. Jim and I...
You seem to think that I have the same interest in your emotional conflicts as you have. I haven't. And now let me tell you what I think. Jim Forster is just as unlikely to allow you to pick his friends for him as I would be myself. With Jim and myself, it has never been anything else but friendship. I never thought it could be anything else, until you suggested it. And I must say, you make the idea sound very intriguing. Good night.
I've warned you.
Yes, you have, haven't you?
So I think that's enough of a summary. Let's head over to the round table to see what we thought. I'm joined there by Smokey and Kev.
Well, gentlemen, the gambler and the lady. The beginning is the end credit scene as well, really, isn't it? It's an interesting way to start a film.
Yes.
Or a bad way to start a film, as some may put it.
I didn't mind it at all, because in a first viewing, I didn't really pick up on who the person was that you saw.
You hate flash forwards.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is, in this particular instance, because it was all shot at night, in a kind of, we skipped by it type of way, something dramatic happens, and the whole way, sort of through the film, I'm waiting, how's that going to tie it with what happens at the end? And it's only, as I suspect, as the filmmakers intended, you realise who that was and what's about to happen to them. And I quite like that.
Yeah, I thought that was very neat. And it had a Meet Simon Cherry style about it as well, where you got a different approach to the same scene.
Smokey, you clearly disagree. No, it's fine. That's what this is about.
I very much disagree. I mean, I think this is an incredibly lazy opening to a film. Right, so let's cross the bingo card off straight away. A vehicular assault again has occurred.
And some.
Yeah,
in the opening frame. Again, with another laughable Amdram dive out of the way of a car. I mean, no one can get legitimately hit by a car in any of these films, by the way. We need some stuntmen around and not just trying to hit people. No, I thought it was lazy. It's just start off in the in the gambling house. Just start off there. That's a perfect way to start.
No,
You learn. Hang on. You learn who the flunkies are and who the heavies are. You learn who the big boss is straight away. That's fine. I didn't need any of that at the beginning. I thought it was a complete waste of time.
I think I'm right between the two of you because I can definitely see both points of view. I can definitely agree with you, Smokey, to a certain degree. If I'd been filming this and producing it, I wouldn't have opened with that start. But in the same way I defend what I said, I still quite liked it. But I can definitely see both points of view here. So I think I'm the middleman to your two extremes on this occasion.
Yeah, because
Just
I'm
for
the other
once.
extreme.
Just for once.
Well, how many films have we watched now that have actually said the first half an hour is an absolute slog? Whereas this, you've got this first 30 seconds of the film and you're right into it. And it's kind of, oh, God. Because, I mean, it starts off with a brilliant piece of sound design for a start off, the couple of gunshots, and then vehicular slaughter. I mean, good grief. And then you go, bang, credits. Is this the first time we've seen an open scene before the credits as well?
It might be. There haven't been that many, certainly. If they've been,
I can't think of any.
What I would say as well is that sort of moving on into the film from that point, genuinely, almost until the film ended, I didn't really know what type of film I was watching, and I really liked that. I had no idea where this film was going. I didn't know whether we were watching a romance between the gambler and the lady, whether we were watching a side of a gangster film where we've got our two sort of brothers taking over our sort of protagonist's lead, Jim Foster's gambling den, whether they were there to sort of muscle him out, whether it was going to be a revenge flick, whether it was going to be a jilted lover flick, whether, I didn't know what I was watching, and I loved that. I really liked it.
I'm not sure. For me, it just seemed that he couldn't make up his mind. And where, like, perfect example is the last film. We had that it had this wonderful comic streak running through it that aided towards what the film was trying to do. This threw in a little bit at the beginning, like with his elocution and him wanting to fit into high society. But then that's all just ditched to me. Right, okay, right. I'm going to come straight out of this. This film is on a mission to nowhere. It doesn't know what it wants to be. And also, if you're going to bring in the fact that, okay, we have a gangster, an American gangster, who, again, we've got a yank on these shores, again, bingo card, and he's wanting to not technically go straight, but he wants to be more on the up and up. Fine, do that. But then it's not, he can't do that until he's met someone of a higher class family. But that doesn't happen until 40 minutes into the film, and it's a 71-minute long film. It's all just a mishmash of him either being embarrassed because of who he is, embarrassed of who he's trying to be, or just a big pile of meh. It's just, no, I'm sorry. This is just, again, we've said this many times before. This film is a mess. It's an utter mess of ideas that just never really come off.
I'm slowly trying to turn your screen off right now because, oh my God. Wow. I thought this was such a tightly written story because you've got 2 or 3 possible revenge cases going on. You don't know exactly who's going to be the one that bumps him off at the end. You've got the whole of the gang warfare that the mafia are muscling in. You've got a pretty good murder as well. Oh, and you've got a brilliant bar fight.
Yeah, there's a cracking bar fight.
There's a brilliant love triangle that is kind of forced in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think how to put this. There is a key scene, shall we say, between Pat and Lady Susan, where basically Pat says, hands off is mine. And she's kind of, well, I was never having my hands on, but now you've given me the idea, I might do. That's about 45 minutes into a 72-minute film. Do you feel like that's probably a bit too forced?
I think that the film's called The Gambler and the Lady. And I think, again, I'm going to play the role of peacemaker between you two in this episode. Because I think it's a bit of a misnomer. The film is about the gambler. It's about his life. And what I found very interesting about the film was you found out a lot about him and you followed his story. And yes, it's exactly what Kev said. It was throwing up sort of red herrings and dead ends and which way was the film going to go. But I thought he was great. I thought the character was very interesting, and I wanted to watch his story unfold, and I didn't know where it was going to go.
I will give you that. Dane Clark is very good. I will give
He's
you that.
great. He's very watchable and very enjoyable. I would say the slightly more problematic element of it was, and again, this is to meet Smokey halfway, was when the lady character was introduced, and you think, well, this is clearly the main plot point they're trying to shoehorn into here. And is it the most interesting part of this? Possibly not, I'd argue, but it did lead to the film's conclusion and to the thing that kind of undoes our hero. But no, I enjoyed this, and I enjoyed that about it, and I find it difficult to sit here and say otherwise, and I won't. But going back to what you were saying, Kev, about the sort of the love triangle, that's what ultimately leads to a quite shocking conclusion to this film.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I did not, despite the fact that we see it happen in the opening shots of the film, I did not see it coming. And that to me is to the film's credit.
Yeah, totally. You just feel like if it's going to come undone at all, it's going to be with the gang warfare that's
exactly
really kicking off. Yeah.
I think we've all watched a different film. I don't know. I don't know what you guys are talking about at all. I think, as I said, I agree with you that Dan Clark is great. He plays it really well, especially his way of pronouncing Folkestone.
I meant to say that. It reminded me so much of, Goal with Fulham.
Fulham,
Folkestone,
West Ham United. Yes, it was just like that, wasn't it? Well, let's just flash on that very briefly. The accents in this film are atrocious. Dane Clark is fine because he's an American, and that's great. But everyone else, the heavies, the gangsters, you've got one guy who is from Vienna trying to be a Chicago gangster, and that was just really weird. The Russian dude at the beginning.
Is that what he was trying to be? Genuinely,
well,
I had
think
no
so.
idea.
No,
I'm assuming so, but that's what it sounded kind of like. But I mean, these are just, it was distracting how bad they were.
Just give me the word, I'll make you pay.
In my country, we pay the police to keep their eyes shut.
She's been saying some very spiteful things about Mr. Foster lately. And drinking, Mr. Davis, drinking something terrible.
Look, I don't like him any more than you do. You know that. But I tell you to forget him. After all, you've got a good job with Clonus. I'll forget him.
Angelo, I think maybe you better pay Mr. Foster a visit.
Davis was in here tonight, Jim.
And then I think the biggest, I don't know what it is, faux pas miscasting ever. Kathleen Byron playing Pat, I thought was atrocious. Every scene she was in, she was barking, she was screaming.
She was great.
She was over and chewing the scenery every single frame.
Have you seen her play Mad Sister Ruth in Black Narcissus?
I have seen Black Narcissus.
She does that good.
Yeah, she does it good in that film. She doesn't do it good in this film.
She brings it to the table every time.
Awful. And there is a reason why. There's a scene where she is yelling at Dane Clark's character, and she is just screaming at him, and the score gets so loud that you can barely hear her. Someone at Hammer was going, Jesus Christ, we can't let people hear her act that way. Just turn the volume up, will you?
Get back in the gutter where you belong, in the gutter.
I was there sitting there going, thank you, Mr. Musical Director. You've saved my ears from this scenery chewing. Oh, God.
You didn't want to take me out tonight. You tried to get out of it.
Pat, look. Maybe we've been seeing too much of each other. Maybe we'll be...
Once a week. I can remember when you wanted to see me every night. Soon I won't be seeing you at all.
This isn't getting us any place.
Don't think I don't know what you're after. The sort of people you're trying to reach. But you know what? They're not going to have you. In spite of your money and your fancy clothes, they're not going to have you. They'll laugh at you. And when they're tired of laughing, they'll toss you back in the gutter where you came from. You don't like to hear that, but it's true. That's where you belong, Jim Foster. In the gutter with all the other trash. In the gutter, the gutter.
No. That particular scene actually shows how unhinged Pat has become, because she's screaming at one moment at absolute, she's going to kill him. And then she completely turns on a full 180 and she's, I'm sorry.
Terrible.
And it's complete psychotic. You've no idea where she's going with this.
Some of the biggest miscasting we've seen in any of the Hammer films we've watched so far.
I'm loving this. This is the first time for ages we've had a proper disagreement, and it makes for such a more interesting discussion.
It's atrociously bad. It's absolutely horrible. It's lovely to see Naomi Chance back again. She's great. I mean, she was a very small bright point in Wings of Danger, and to see her back in this, playing essentially the same character but just a bit higher class, was great. She was wonderful. But I mean, as I said, the gangsters, the heavies, the guy who runs the cafe that Jim had gone to when he had no money. That guy, hey, it's a me, Mario. Oh, you came in it, and it's it was like, no, mate, you're from Doncaster.
Smokey. Talking of accents, did you notice who was Pat's dancing partner? It's the actor Martin Benson, who is a Brit, and he always turns up in every film as a sort of either Latino or a heavy. He's always a heavy anyway.
Foreigner.
But yeah, it is just that, isn't it? And I think his biggest role has to be as one of the mafia in Goldfinger. He turns up in one of the PC-49 films as well, again as an Italian.
PC-49 and in The Dark Light as well, apparently.
Yeah, but he always plays the other.
Oh, yes, of course. In The Dark Light, yes, he's one of the heavies, isn't he?
Yes, he is, yeah. He's also
always
in The Omen. Go figure.
Yeah, but in this,
Damien
is completely against...
It's all for you, Damien.
Is completely against his usual type, and he's actually playing an English dancer, which was quite a breath of fresh air to see him doing something like that.
Fair enough. I'll give you that. Yeah.
I thought that made for quite an intriguing point, though. The dancers that had become to resent the guy who had employed them because they felt there's undertones of this guy who's come from nothing, who's getting above his station, trying to be something he's not. And there's a really interesting class commentary in this film about what you should and shouldn't aspire to, and about where you've come from. And I really like that, because on the one hand, you've got the sort of... So we've got our sort of protagonist. We've got Jim Foster, who's come from nothing. There's a little bit in the film about how he's gambled his way to having money, and then he's basically doubled down on opening these establishments that have made him more money. And on the one hand, you've got the people with whom, in inverted commas, he belongs, who are telling him, don't try and better yourself. The upper crust don't want anything to do with you. And then we get this scene later in the movie, sort of about halfway through, where he meets these the upper class people, and they, the vast majority of them, bar one, they mock him. They don't want anything to do with him, and you think
horrible.
It's very much a lonely man's story. He's stuck in the middle, and I think there's a bit of a... I don't wish to sound too sort of melodramatic, but there's a bit of an everyman story in this, because I think everybody feels at times as though they don't fit in, places, and I think that's what this film is about. It's a guy who really doesn't fit in. He wants something that he's not been born into, and he's better than that he has, and that these are his feelings, not mine.
Agreed.
And it's a very lonely story, and I think that the way the film ends, not to utterly spoil it, is it's a very tragic ending, but it's a satisfactory ending, taking into consideration what we've seen in terms of Jim's life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
I'll give you that.
I think as far as writing's concerned, don't forget, Sam Newfield's only been in the UK for, maybe a year or so, and he's been able to absolutely nail the whole obsession with class in Britain, because it's the only country that does anything like that. To an American, it just seems bizarre. And he's been able to actually nail it and say, look, it doesn't matter what class you're from, everybody's in it for themselves. And it's just a different colour crime. You've got white collar and blue collar crime. That's the only difference. And he's actually really sort of stamping it home towards the end with one of the best looking film newspapers I've ever seen as well.
Yes, it's
utterly convincing.
It does look
it's a classy piece of print. As a bibliophile, given it's my job, I can say that looked like a proper newspaper, I have to say.
It did.
I do love the fact that Jim's, sort of accountant / best mate is called Dave Davies, and so anytime he wants to call him, he just shouts for Dave, and it's sort of like, are you calling him by his first name or by his second name? It doesn't really matter. But
isn't Dave Davies one of the Kinks?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's one of the brothers. Yeah, but
I thought you were a snooker player.
But it's
no, you're thinking of Steve.
Nicky Davis.
When he introduces Dave to Lady Susan, he just sort of says, "Dave, come here. This is David." And it was just like, "Hang on, you just shouted for Dave." Yeah, I mean, look, I obviously I have issues with this film that you guys don't, but it's just like I think it's another one of those where I could see the potential of it, and I could see that there was a bigger story there that could have been explored, and maybe with a little more time they could have done. But for me, it was just too all over the place. It was also for the fact that I didn't give a crap. I really didn't care if Jim succeeded or not. I didn't really care if these American gangsters were coming in, having also, oh, by the way, which was brilliant, having already taken over Rome and Paris, and now they want your little hole of a bit of London. It was just sort of like, I don't care. It was just, it elicited no response from me at all that this guy wanted to better himself. Although I have to say, the scene when he is getting taught which cutlery to use, like in Pretty Woman, it was just sort of like, oh, that's kind of sweet. And so I did kind of warm to him a little bit for that. But after that, he's disowning his friends, he's disowning his background just because he sees this investment opportunity. And it was just sort of like, well, you don't deserve it. And so, no.
So basically, Smokey, what you're saying is that this film is exactly like Snowpiercer, where everybody has to know their place and stay there, don't actually have any upward mobility at all.
I didn't say that. I say he can want to be better. He can want to improve himself. That's absolutely fine. But the way the film portrays it, it's just bad. It's just badly done. And also, I know you're going to bring this up in a bit, but the script is awful. It's such a dog.
No.
I'm going to jump in again and play peacemaker here because I'm going to meet you halfway between what both of you say. Because I understand exactly where you're coming from, Smokey. He's not the most empathetic character.
Nope.
I completely agree. I found myself more invested in his journey rather than wanting him to be something. I didn't really care if he was the hero or whatever he was. I just found myself embroiled in his journey. But I do take the point that he is quite an unsympathetic hero, and that I can see why you couldn't get behind him if that's what you wanted to be able to do, because you can't. And if you go into the film looking for a hero, and that's again, bear in mind he is half of the title character. It's true. I can understand that, but I think that's borne out with how going back to how the film ends. I think when you watch the film through, you kind of realise that that's maybe the film writer's intentions, that he never really was meant to be the hero we all maybe wanted him to be.
That we all deserve.
The hero, yeah, just not the one we've got right now. Yeah.
It's more like a film being made for the code, really, isn't it? Because you got to be shown that crime doesn't pay.
Yeah, I guess so.
And don't forget, this was for the American market as well. So you've already got him in the opening scenes in the cafe. He talks about his past and says there is a convicted killer.
Yeah, murderer. Yeah, well, manslaughterer.
Yeah. Accidental manslaughterer.
I think that's a really a pertinent and large point, though, Kev, that you've made there, is to say that, that maybe that is the whole point of the film, is to prove that crime doesn't pay, because regardless of how sort of redemptive, and he's a nice person. I mean, that's played out a lot in the film, but he, he's involved in ongoing crime, and he has been a more severe criminal in the past. And some would argue that there's a certain a degree of comeuppance occurs.
Yeah, okay.
Because Dave, who is his business manager, at one point actually says, "Why don't you just stick to nightclubs?" And to me, that's just like asking Dr. Evil to stick to his Starbucks business instead. There's no reason at all for it, but he'll just carry on doing the side hustle as well because he wants more, because he's greedy.
He is.
In fact, he's a heel, and he's surrounded by a bunch of heels. There's not very many characters in here that are particularly likable. Actually, Smokey, thinking about it, you said about the writing on this, and this is Sam Newfield writing, and I always imagined him being very schlocky and very sort of, cut and short and get it out there, but some of the dialogue in this is absolutely brilliant. Is there anything that stands out for you, lads? Because I've got a few lines that were real humdingers, and I was very surprised at how well this was put together.
Yeah, I've got a few lines that stood out for me. I very much enjoyed, "I'm running this outfit, Jacko, and I'm running it my way." I thought that was quite a succinct way, very early on in the film to say sort of, very much who's in charge. I also like the line, a man makes his own standards, when they're talking about the upper class and how to live your life. And, I thought that was a nice way to sort of state it in a little bit of an underplayed way. I also like the line, and I didn't really understand it. You might need you two to explain it to me. I was so broke, I had wrinkles on my stomach. What?
Yeah. Just means he's very hungry.
Yeah, oh, okay. So it just means
stretch marks.
He'd creased inwards.
You can see his ribs, basically.
He'd gone concave rather than convex.
Exactly. Yeah. I will give you that. One of the lines I really did like was when Pat was warning off Lady Susan, and she sort of just says, well, I've warned you. And she just looks at her and goes, yes, you have, haven't you? And she just walks out and is like, oh!
That's an absolute killer line. That's fantastic.
That was cold and a burn at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Well, Lady Susan does this twice in this scene as well, because when she first meets her, she says, oh, the dancer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the way she's...
beautiful.
Just brilliant,
Yeah.
How to dismiss the competition, just like
that. In one fell swoop.
All right, but let me give you two examples of the script not working.
Go on then.
Go on then. In your opinion.
In my personal opinion, my humble opinion, which I'm allowed to have because it's our show.
Of course you are.
Yeah, of course I am. Is that they do it twice that I could see. There may have been more times, but I think there was just twice of someone going, I'm going to tell you what I know. And someone goes, oh, you're going to tell me what you know? They literally bark back the same line. But they also use it in a different scene as well. And it's just, that is lazy. Why use that trope twice when they're completely different characters? I don't get it. Right. I'm honestly going back to this. We have watched a completely different film. I don't see what you guys have seen because this is Whispering Smith all over again. I saw something you didn't see.
Not that awful film. Yeah.
that awesome film. Yes, that's right.
Awful.
You pronounced awesome wrong.
That's fine.
But yeah. But
the American version.
As you said, this is good though. We need differing opinions sometimes.
Absolutely. No, genuinely agree.
If we all love them all the time, then it would make for a remarkably dull listening.
Well, I'll counter your argument then, Smokey, with
again
a couple of my favourite lines. Yeah. There's a line where he says, a library's where they keep books, isn't it? And then the response is, should I call my room the hospital because it's got a bed in it? And I thought that was fantastic. Yeah. And the easy sort of relationship that Dave and Jim have is really brought home when he says to Dave, how's your ulcer? And Dave says, oh, it's nagging a bit. And then he went, well, that makes two of you.
Nice.
Yeah. There's some really nice... It's probably because I've watched it about 5 or 6 times now over the last year or so, not just in this today.
You haven't done it like 8 in 2 days like River Patrol.
Oh, God, no. Never doing that again. But you do tend to pick up on the subtleties, and there are quite a lot in there.
It also alludes to Dave's clear alcoholism as well, which is, in a quite a subtle way without, he never basically calls him a drunk. But, talking about his ulcer and a couple of other things he mentions, they know, and they don't have to talk about it,
Fair enough.
That's an interesting dynamic as well, because
it is.
Jim's a teetotaler.
But then this is the thing, though, isn't it? All right, so you start off with a quote unquote gangster who doesn't touch a drop. So it's like, well, that's just a massive red flag that he's going to fall off the wagon at some point before now and the end of the film. And it was just like, well, that's just lazy. Well, I know it's going to happen, so why don't you just get to it?
No, I like that because the British, he wasn't a gangster as such, but Lenny McLean famously didn't drink because he'd beaten up a good friend of his when he'd had too much to drink and seen what he'd done the next day, and he never drank again after that. Fine. And he was a notorious British gangster, and I think there is an established narrative there.
Fine, but get it out of the way.
Quite like
Surprise
that.
Me.
But again, playing the middleman, mate, between what you're saying, I understand what you're saying. It can be perceived as lazy writing in so much that you know where it's going to get you to.
Yep.
But I really like that. But it goes back to what we're saying about overarching about our main character. It's a tragedy. We're talking about a film that's a tragedy, and it's released to us maybe in ways in which that we've sort of received and appreciated differently. And I'm not patronising you, mate, at all. I'm not saying, oh, you should like this film. I genuinely can understand the points that you're making as to why you didn't like this. But as we've always said, these films are subjective, and we've come at these things from different angles. And this has been great. I've really enjoyed hearing your point of view.
It's also, I'd like to reinforce, it's not the fact that I disliked this film, it's just it's so problematic that it became an issue for me. There are many things to enjoy about this film, don't get me wrong, there are. It's not a terrible film, it's a good, good-ish film, but it's just the problems...
All right, don't patronise me.
But the problems of it amount to more than the sum of its parts, and that's an issue. And more so on rewatches, I was just I saw more faults than I saw positives. And if you come away from watching a film like we have done for the last 30 plus episodes, this is where you have to draw a line. And when we looked at something like Stolen Face or Lady in the Fog, which were two films I thoroughly enjoyed, it came to this, and while I can appreciate how it looks or how it's acted in certain places, but then I can also see the downside of some of the script issues and some of the pacing issues of a 71-minute film. And unfortunately, for me personally, they just became too much to fully enjoy it.
Coming back to the drinking bit, it's just dawned on me that this could be looked at as the Americans' view on the British, because in every scene he's offered drinks from all and sundry.
True.
Whichever character he meets, they're saying drink, which is exactly what happens here all the time. You know, everybody drinks. Mm-hmm. You know, you're looked at as some kind of weirdo if you're a teetotaler.
Yeah. Well, it still happens a lot in this day and age, doesn't it? You know.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, exactly.
I also think that the nature of the business in which they're involved as well. You know, I mean, you don't get involved in a gambling, a nightclub business. You know, the drink goes hand in hand. I also think with the from what we've seen from the other Hammer films as well, the aristocracy. You'd assume from what again, I'm only basing it on what we've seen, that every meeting seems to involve the offer of a drink as a kind of a welcome or an icebreaker. Mm-hmm. But yes, Kev, I completely agree that it's obviously inherent in the script for a reason.
Agreed.
Why don't you relax just once and have a drink?
No, thanks. How can you taste the stuff if you pour it down you like that?
It's not the taste I like it. It helps me to talk in a way I wouldn't otherwise.
One last thing before we start tying things up, I guess. The Gambler and the Lady has to be the most nailed-on title ever. It's exactly what it says in the can.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
Honestly, having watched this film, you've both watched it, and I'll find it amazing if you disagree with me. Why was this film not called The Jack of Spades? Other than the fact that we've seen a film called The Jack of Diamonds from Hammer already.
Good point.
The Jack of Spades is surely what this film should have been called.
I guess maybe that's it. I mean, maybe that is the reason that they've already done the Jack of Diamonds. I mean, possibly. Gambler and the Lady is very on the nose, and actually, again, a little bit lazy as well. It's not the most dynamic of titles, is it?
Well, particularly as to reiterate what I said earlier, it's not really about the lady. It's very much the gambler's film. I mean, if the film had been called The Gambler, the thing is though, he's not even a gambler.
No, he's not.
He's a casino owner.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You know, I think I'm agreeing.
Ex-gambler.
It's just a weird title. It's a clunky title.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah, and also the well, I mean, we've been through this before with different titles in different territories. The only difference to the title of this in different territories was the at the beginning.
Yeah,
I mean, was the really so important? You know,
there was a media agency charging £50,000 for that.
There you go. Exactly.
It's $50,000. Cheers.
Yeah, very odd. Very odd.
Okay then. Fine. The final scores and any other thoughts before we wrap up? Smokey, get yours out of the way first.
as I said, there are things to enjoy in this. As I said, the majority of the cast is quite solid. Nothing spectacular or out of the ordinary. As I said, the accents are a stumbling block because it just detracts you from everything. There was the scene where Jim goes back to the place where he got his dollar lent to him when he was completely flat broke and made back all his money, and you have the drunken, sweary blokes on the other table taking the mick out of him and then decided to fight him. And all right, I'm gonna take him on now. And it was I love that. It was dreadful. And the wonderful bit of him throwing a chair and it looks like it's made of like toothpicks and it knocks the bloke out cold. It was just a bit silly. The denouement is kind of cool. I kind of like a room full of geezers and two guns and the lights go out and you don't know who's going to die. I kind of like that. But yeah, just ultimately, it's, as I said, its issues overshadow what could have been a really tight gangster drama of someone looking to better themselves. And just ultimately, it became sloppy and misguided, and it needed a firm hand to direct it and possibly even a script rewrite. But I'm not going to be too harsh. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I think it's decent without being good. It's fine. It's a stopgap for Hammer in my book. We've come off the back of 2 really good films, and we're into a situation now where it's sort of like, well, this is the beginning of 1953. We may as well throw a B movie out there, and this is a classic, so far, Hammer B movie that doesn't even have aspirations of being an A picture, which is a damn shame. But yeah, it's fine, but decidedly average.
Fair enough. Ben?
Yeah, I'm going to, obviously, as we've already kind of talked about, I'm going to rate it higher than Smokey has. I'm going to give it a 7. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the journey that I was taking on. Not really knowing where the film was going until the final frame, ironically, given that it's massively sort of foreshadowed by the opening frame. I thoroughly enjoyed, as a bit of a snippet, the fact that when people get shot at the end, they die like people who've just looked at a terrible utility bill. They just sort of collapse on. Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, I'm just going down. There's. We've already talked about our differences, so I'm not going to go over them. But I enjoyed this film. It led me a merry dance in the best possible way. Didn't know what was going on. Enjoyed it for that. I thought it was a much tighter film than Smokey clearly did, which is absolutely fine.
That's absolutely fine.
As I say, I love the fact that we talk about these things, and it elevates our understanding and thinking. Talking to people who are knowledgeable and about films is the best part of this podcast for me.
Agreed.
So yeah, I'd rate it a 7, and I would recommend it. It is a B picture. Again, I agree with what Smokes has said, but it's not one of the very best Hammer films that we've seen. But it's definitely, of the secondary films, one that I would suggest people check out. Kev?
I'd agree with you completely on that, Ben. I'm going for a 7 as well. But probably scored higher, but there was certain parts like the cafe scene where he sits down and Jim just basically tells you his life story in...
that exposition was ridiculous.
Yeah, that was just so unnatural, and I felt like they could have really done without that, or somehow slice it down a little bit. Obviously you couldn't cut it out completely because it leads to the fight in the cafe, where the toughs are taking the mickey out of his flower. So it does need to be there, but I felt like that kind of was a bit clunky. But then there's just the whole quotes and the whole take on class and what have you. And for somebody to approach it that's from somewhere completely different to us, as far as culturally, and to actually get a handle on it, and to deliver something like this. I mean, don't forget there's the line from Lady Greer where she says, "Don't you think I should cut my cake?" And Peter says to her, "After that appalling display of bad manners, I think you should cut your throat."
That was a good line.
That is, I don't wish to be a play on words, but that is pretty cutting as a line.
Yes,
it really is.
Yep. It's another cold burn.
It is, yeah. He's the master of the cold burn. So there are highlights in there, and it's funnily enough, like I mentioned before, I've seen this quite a few times now, and each time I've been able to dig something else out. So it's one that I'd quite happily stick on. So I'd recommend it as well.
So there you have it. With that, we've reached the end of this episode, well, more or less. But before we go, just a quick reminder to give us a rating on your podcatcher of choice. One man or woman can make a difference. And remember, you can follow us on the socials on Twitter and Instagram at HouseHammerPod. Also, should you wish to send us an email, you can do so via scream@houseofhammerpodcast.com. Should you wish to adorn yourself in House of Hammer podcast merchandise, simply have a glance at the episode show notes to find the URL that will whisk you to merch heaven in our online store. And finally, should you want more of the House of Hammer, and good God almighty, who wouldn't, you can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/househammerpod. For as little as £1 per month, you can get extra perks and benefits, and for a little bit more, there's a bunch of extra content to stick in your ears and enjoy. Right, well, I think that finally is it. So until next time, it's goodbye from me, Ben Taylorson.
From me, Smokey.
And from me, Kev Moore.
And we look forward to seeing you next time for another look round the House of Hammer, where we'll be investigating a man trap whilst trying not to get snared, which could be almost impossible if it's baited with beer, cheese, and questionable opinions. Take care.